Um, Thank you. Well, a big thank you to the student groups that really helped us put this on, as well as Julia Herbst, who waved, Julia, and Heaven Campbell and Jody Finber. This is an absolute team effort, and so we couldn't, and again, we keep it free to engage you all. So I wanted to quickly introduce an awesome partner of ours, Vote Solar and Katie. But while you're sitting there, on the back of your agenda is a survey and a little questionnaire that we would love to get your feedback on what you thought about today's events, even the food, whatever it may be. Really lay it out for us. That really helps us improve our next congresses over the next years. So feel free to fill that out, and there is a pretty gold sparkly box that you're going to drop it in when you leave today, so don't forget that. And with that, I want to introduce Katie Ottenweller with Vote Solar. She is the Southeast Director, and Katie's going to kind of brief us on what's going on in Tallahassee. And I just have to say, I think this is the first year of God knows how long ago, where we've had so many positive solar legislation, perhaps on the horizon in a long time. So she's going to kind of share that. It's what we like to say, one rooftop at a time, one solar array at a time. So we're really excited to have Katie share with us what's going on in Tallahassee, and then we can kind of talk. I'll jump back in and we can share with you how to get more involved to support solar legislation in Florida. So, Katie.
Thank you. It's so good to be here. As Angela said, my name is Katie Childs Ottenweller. I'm the Southeast Director with Vote Solar. Sun is such an amazing partner. It's really fun to be here. I want to save a lot of time for Q&A because I really want to talk about the things that y'all want to talk about. So I'm just going to give a quick overview of some of the highlights of what's going on in Tallahassee, lowlights of what's going on in Tallahassee. Tallahassee is an interesting place. And then we can dive right in to some conversation. So, just a quick overview of what's been going on and what I think's going on coming up on the next legislative session, which is going to start in a couple of months. So first off, somebody mentioned earlier, we were talking about the need to engage both sides of the aisle. Solar is incredibly bipartisan and popular. 89% of Americans want to see more solar energy. That holds up even among the most conservative Republicans. 80% want to see more solar. 96% of progressive liberals want to see more solar. So this is like apple pie and puppies. I mean, it's incredibly popular. That being said, a lot of the policies that we are pushing for, we tend to be on the other side of some very politically powerful entities who are very big political contributors. And so when we start talking about your right to go solar and to be protected from punitive rate treatment and to be allowed to get fair compensation for the solar energy you're sending onto the grid, that's where things get a little messier, right? And so, we've got some big goals that we're trying to reach. There's a lot of great organizations that are advocating in Tallahassee for change. So there's lots of ways to get plugged in. And nationally, we're starting to see some real progress. So one of the big issues that I think is going to be discussed in the upcoming session is 100% clean energy goals. So there's lots of cities in Florida that have started making these commitments. By 2040, by 2050, we want to be 100% clean energy, or we want to have, really serious carbon reduction goals in place. One issue that we are tracking very closely is this is a very preemption-happy legislature. So we are making sure that there's nothing that they're going to enact that is going to limit local government's ability to make those decisions for themselves. So that defense that we're playing is kind of the first thing that we're really fighting for. But then on top of that, there are some legislators who have proposed 100% clean energy goals at the state level. So 25% of Americans now live in a state that has made a 100% clean energy goal. So we're starting to see these pass, even in this last legislative session in the spring, several more states, places like New Mexico started going in this direction. So this is not a crazy policy. This is a really reasonable policy to put these goals in place. There's some bills that have been proposed to this effect. We're hoping to get a workshop on that. We're starting to see Republicans talk about climate change in a way that they really haven't in the past. So, you know, we've got some opportunities that I think we really need to take advantage of. Another big issue that we are working with partners on has to do with access to financing. So Florida is one of only 4 states that explicitly bans power purchase agreements for on-site solar. This is a really important financing tool, especially for entities that can't capture tax incentives like churches, schools, government. They need to be able to enter into a power purchase agreement with a solar company. They put the solar system on the roof, and then they only purchase the solar that is sent from the rooftop system onto their property. Totally common sense. Georgia passed legislation several years ago that was supported by Republicans that clarified the legality of these types of financing. There's several bills in the mix now, and I think more that will be filed that allow for power purchase agreements for different entities. So, you know, I think there's a really interesting opportunity to make some headway on that particular issue. Another issue I wanted to highlight that we've been working really closely with Sun on is solar and storage for resilience purposes. We know we're seeing really strong hurricanes. We're going to continue to see more natural disaster related issues. Florida is on a peninsula, in case you didn't know, so we are particularly susceptible to climate change issues. So looking at how we can invest in rooftop investments, in solar and storage, particularly for critical emergency facilities, emergency operation centers, shelters, fire stations, things like that. It's just really common sense policy. So we're starting to talk with legislators about that. We're hoping to have a sponsor for a bill that's going to be opening up a grant program and a study process for looking at what a statewide policy around resilience could look like. And then the last thing I wanted to flag is just net metering defense. This is an issue that we track all over the country. It's certainly something that we're watching here in Florida. Starting to see some attacks on net metering at the local level. If y'all are on our email list or Sun's, you're certainly hearing about those efforts, and we're always really wary of that in Tallahassee. So, you know, that's something that we're going to be continuing to look out for. Talking to legislators, even just this week I was up in Tallahassee sitting with Republicans and Democrats and talking about the importance of rooftop solar policies and protecting people's right to generate solar. So, you know, that's an area that we're going to continue to work on too. And maybe I'll stop there and see if there are any questions or comments.
My question is pretty much like a common sense things to me, but other people may not. The roof, the top roof system last apparently when we heard this morning and this afternoon about 25 years give or take. Well, in Florida, the average roof made of shingles lasts no more than 18, 20 years. Question, what do you do with the rest of the time? You need to replace your roof. Do you need to remove the entire set of panels, change the roof and then put it back on? You know how much that costs just for removing it and put it back on? $1,000. So I give you the question so you will answer. What?
It's a great question. I feel like maybe it's a better question for you, Angela, since y'all are the solar installation experts that are helping people figure out how to do this.
Repeat the question.
A question of so systems last, as we all learned earlier today, if you have your own system, last and they're warranted 25 years. But here in Florida, our roofs need to be replaced in the interim, somewhere in between there. And in that case, yes, you'll have to have it removed and reinstalled. And by the way, this is a question that we ask our installers who bid on all of our projects, what they will charge to provide that service, because most of you will need that service down the road. So that is a question, but it's a matter of calling the installer that you used, or perhaps another one of your choosing down the road, having them come and take it off, and then reinstalling it after you have your roof replaced.
And the panels will protect the roof and give you longer lifespan.
But take a standing seam metal roof in your 50 years.
Yeah.
Most of the degradation
Depends on your
comes
roof.
from solar energy, which you're putting to better use.
Well, yes,
No
that's
metal
a possibility.
roofs.
What do you do in the interim? I'm in the middle of the room right now.
Yeah.
Are there any questions about solar policy in Tallahassee?
Yeah.
What you?
Yeah, I have one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I received an email from you a couple of days ago that I should join the revolution. I want to do that, and it's in regards of your petition number 2019-0061. And I've compared yesterday the original filing from FPL
Yeah.
with your stipulated settlement.
Great.
And it has something to do with this revolution. And
Yes.
you're talking about it. And the only thing I could kind of find is that we have here the column for the low-income people,
Yeah.
and the tariffs have slightly changed. But to be really straight and really honest, I think that this is utility solar, what
Yes.
we talked before, and you have signed this, and you
Yeah.
signed off on these tariffs, and I felt like, oh my God.
Yeah.
What did you do? You know, really.
I would love to talk to you about this. Yeah, okay, so, and this gets into the conversation that we had at the last panel, but if y'all weren't in the room, it gets into what is community solar and what is not community solar. So this is not community solar. This is an FPL utility subscription program.
Yeah.
So utilities are starting to offer these programs. They come in all flavors. Some are significantly better than others. So I think terminology really does matter here. And so we are careful to talk about this in the right way. But this program, this is actually the first time that we ever intervened at the Public Service Commission because it was the biggest utility-sponsored program in the country. And it was effectively designed so that low-income customers could not participate. You were going to have to pay a premium for 7 years to participate in it, and then you would get savings for about 23 years after that. And so as far as utility-sponsored programs, this was not necessarily a terrible program. It wasn't a premium forever, but it was effectively designed to make it easier for big companies and large government users to go solar, and we felt like there was a reason to get engaged to make sure that the folks who most needed relief from solar were able to participate in it. And so our singular focus in getting involved in that proceeding was to say you have to make this reasonably available for low-income customers to participate. We entered into a settlement with Florida Power and Light. The settlement does open up the largest carve-out for low-income solar that any utility has ever voluntarily signed on to. And so for that, that's a win. It's not a perfect program, but it is a start. And
Is that
so,
in Florida or the whole
Yes.
country? Yeah.
yes, so
But
it,
hand in hand with these goes, if I may interrupt you here, is really that there's a second initiative that's actually against the monopoly as it is.
You're talking about deregulation?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you and Dr. Stephen Smith do not support this.
I actually have never taken a position on that,
Okay.
so I can't
Yeah.
speak for SACE
Okay. Yeah.
and why they made that, but Sun and Vote Solar haven't taken a position on the deregulation constitutional amendment provision.
Yeah.
It's before the Supreme Court right now. I would definitely encourage people to track it because it's a really important policy discussion
What's
that's
it
going
about?
on.
It's about the allowing other companies to sell electricity in Florida. That right now there is like service areas. It's
Yeah.
like the Soviet Union right now. What we have here, where everything is kind of the one guy who gets it all, and then there's no risk involved for Florida Power and Light or Duke or anybody. They just charge us for whatever they spend, you know. And there was an initiative against this, and Vote Solar didn't support this initiative. I don't even know who
Because
it
that same initiative is the one that takes away the requirement for net metering.
Yes, but you know, taking away the requirement for net metering isn't really the end of the world if you get really just compensation for your electricity. You produce it during the daytime, at peak time. You get paid for peak kilowatt hours. And that's more than probably what we're getting right now, 13 cents.
So I want to make sure we're able to address other people's questions too.
Yeah. It's a long story, but I wanted to
is.
kind of bring this up. And also, I appreciate
Let's
that
let other people talk.
Yeah, okay. Good.
Well, the one thing I will say on deregulation to answer your question, sir, is there is a constitutional amendment provision that may end up on the ballot in 2020. It's being reviewed by the Florida Supreme Court right now.
Petitions or?
Yes, so the signature process is going on right now to see if the supporters have enough signatures that it will end up on the ballot. But the language is also being reviewed by the Supreme Court to decide if it's clear enough or if there's something confusing about it for the voters. And so we're waiting for a decision from the Supreme Court. And it's a really big question of, is Florida going to deregulate and look a lot more like Texas looks right now? And it's controversial, and there's groups on both sides. We have not taken a formal position. It's something we're tracking really closely because, you know, there are some potential trade-offs, but you're also talking about some significant energy choice that could be a real benefit to the state.
So if it ends up on the ballot, you will take some kind of position and publicize that?
I think it's very likely that we will, and we'll be working really closely with partners like Sun too.
So, and I'll add to that, Sun would take, like we do in all of the communities with our programs, really, if it is approved by the Florida Supreme Court, then we would probably roll out some sort of educational campaign, pros and cons based on actual research to the communities. And so if you're on our email list, you'll get those timely updates. If it's approved, if they reach the signatures, again, we're really far off. Florida Supreme Court met, I believe, August 28th about this, and they have yet to issue their ruling. By the way, if you want to put something on the ballot, a citizen initiative, it has to be 75 words or less, clear and concise, and that is what they are trying to decide right now.
So this will be for the 2020 November.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Can you speak to net metering and good or bad or otherwise? What is it? Just some clarity on it.
What
Sure.
is net metering?
Yeah, so net metering is a policy that, kind of similar to rollover minutes on your cell phone, it allows you to generate electricity on your roof, and if you're not home at the time that solar power is being generated, it flows onto the grid and you get fair credit for that. In the evening, when you're pulling electricity from the grid, you get a 1-to-1 credit. So the solar power that you are sending onto the grid is valued at the same amount that you are buying brown power from your utility. This policy has come under attack in a lot of states. At very high penetration levels, people start looking at, honestly, more sophisticated policies, but at the penetration levels we're at in Florida, I think we absolutely need to keep this policy in place. And so retail electricity net metering is what we end up talking about here in Florida, and it gets into conversations about what is the value of solar. Should you be getting more for it than what you're paying for electricity from the utility that's fossil fuel generated? Utilities argue you should be getting paid less, more like a wholesale rate, and so there's lots of fights going on about what is solar actually worth. So this policy really is about making sure that solar customers are protected and are able to get credit for the solar energy that they're sending onto the grid.
Thank you.
Sure. Yep.
In light of that question, I want to just talk a little bit about some of my naivete and some of the sort of dirty politics that I've found here in Florida. I'm from Massachusetts,
Get out of town.
and net metering, actually, there's a few types. In Florida, we have what I call a 1-to-1 net metering.
Yep.
So if I produce $400 worth of electricity from my rooftop and I use $300, that $100 is gone. That's the utilities. They made the money on that. In Massachusetts, they give you a payback of that. It's prorated. But here's the
You
problem.
get $100?
There are political forces against even getting the solar onto your roof. For example, didn't Jacksonville just get rid of total net metering altogether? And then what can we do to neutralize people like Jacob Williams, the CEO of Florida Municipal Power Agency, that wants to charge you $50 a month just to be connected to the grid? I think I'm paying $15 presently, which I'm good with. That seems reasonable. So what do we do about it? I mean, they can just strong arm us and that's it.
Yeah, so I think it's what makes groups like Sun so important, and the folks who are in this room, because what ends up happening is we end up playing whack-a-mole, right? Like, so we've got lots of utilities in Florida, and they all have sort of different flavors of net metering or different definitions of it, and even if they're keeping kind of the net metering policy in place, they can kind of back end change their rates for all residential customers, jack up the fixed charges, and then that impacts your ability to even use a policy level. If you're paying $50 before you even turn on a light switch, that's going to affect your return on investment for solar, for energy efficiency, for all kinds of things. And so, so it requires a lot of vigilance on the policy front, and it helps us to have eyes and ears in these communities who are hearing about rate changes, especially if you are, to the Jacob Williams example, if you are a utility that's not heavily regulated by the Public Service Commission, a lot of times it's just like a meeting that will happen in your community at night, and we'll hear that something went down on solar, and then we're scrambling to try to figure out how to address it. And so making sure that folks are showing up at these meetings. Typically a smaller utility, they're very surprised when they see 15 people who are angry about something who show up at a meeting. I mean, it doesn't take a whole lot of advocacy, but you do have to have somebody there who says, this is my utility and this is unacceptable. So, I mean, somebody like FMPA, though, this is a trade organization that sells power to smaller utilities. And so, of course, anything that is going to decrease the amount of their product that they're selling to their customers, they're going to be threatened by that. They should not, and they do not speak for locally owned municipal utilities and electric co-ops, right? So those are either owned by the cities or they are owned by the customers themselves. And so having that direct engagement on the ground is incredibly important. And we also are doing a lot of education and engagement at the regulatory level and at the legislature to make sure that people understand how these policies really affect people on the ground.
Can I?
Have you done anything with PURPA?
Yeah, you want to talk about PURPA? What do you want to know about PURPA?
Hold on, I do want
It's
to.
under attack also.
Yeah.
Before we jump to PURPA, I do want to share the FMPA thing. So how we, to get to your question, how can you get involved? How we heard about this was from local volunteers like Mary DuBois alerting us that Winter Parker's having these discussions, as well as another volunteer out of Gainesville that's attending GRU discussions, and they're talking about these fixed charges. We were able to look at this in a little more in depth and share with our partners who, by the way, just happened to see the FMPA president do a Facebook Live at some conference saying, and that's what this card is all about, they'll stop putting solar on their house, and this is quoting him, make the change now before solar systems are all over the place. This is him encouraging all the local munis to adopt $50 fixed charges to make them go away. So, everyone in here, we have enough of these. All you have to do is sign your name, and it will mail it on your behalf, and it's going directly to the chair of the board of directors of FMPA. They're outside this room. You just drop it in that sparkly gold box. So
Can
all you gotta do is
Can
sign.
I say something to help you with dealing with utilities?
Please.
I'm an engineer, and what they have is they tell you that they have to pay for their distribution lines, okay? And they bitch about that all the time. But as someone said earlier, they make 10% on every dollar they spend off of you. So they're completely money driven. But if you're an engineer and you're designing a line and you're going down a street, okay, that's a dead end street, and you got 30 houses on it, that you may have a voltage drop through your transformers from one end to the other end. So how do you pick that up? You can put transformers, you can put $10,000 worth of transformers at the end of the street to pick the voltage line up. Or you could put 3 grid-tied PV systems that the homeowner buys, they don't spend a dime, and your grid and your inverter, because it's a fixed sine wave through a controlled machine, picks the grid up for them. So they're going to charge you $50 a month for maintenance they have to do to the grid when your inverter that you paid out of your pocket picks up his line voltage and fixes his problem, and then he charges you for fixing his problem after you spent money buying your inverter? Tell these people that you're not stupid. Okay?
Thank you.
And
for
so
that.
you'll find, okay, so you go and you find a dozen electrical engineers like me,
Yeah.
and you'll find that this crap that they're telling you about, oh, well, this costs us this much and this, no,
Yeah.
they're trying to pass the cost to you, so you pay for it, they make their 10% profit. When your inverters, because they're fixed sine, they control the grid, they pick it up and help them.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I will say, I should have gone to electrical engineering school instead of law school because it's so important to have experts like you as part of these processes that we get into and be able to push back on these transmission distribution plans that they're making. And Both Solar is doing a lot of work right now on bringing people like that onto our staff so that they can talk about non-wires alternatives, the ways that inverter values can be monetized, and actually like bring in the value that folks with solar are adding to the grid and allow you to get compensated for it. Because right now they are free riding off of all of it. That's a great point. Yes?
The benefits that solar panels do is mostly every summer afternoon in Florida. I am on the variable rate plan with Lakeland Electric, so I know what they value their electricity every summer afternoon and all versus off-peak time.
Okay.
For half of the summer half of the year, they charge me 16 cents an hour from noon to 9 p.m. It's 5.5 cents an hour all the other time. That is what their retail value of their electric rate is. I benefit from that.
Yeah,
because
absolutely. Yeah,
I
it lines up
adjust my
nicely with
thermostat
solar
accordingly.
consumption. Yeah, absolutely.
But they are telling me and anyone that their electricity is worth 16 cents all summer afternoon.
Well,
Well,
rate
it is.
design absolutely matters.
Do you know why it
Yeah.
is? Because if they have to buy it from someone else, they pay 42 cents.
Yeah.
And they get it from you for 16, and they tell you that you're costing them money? Have you figured out that if there's an outage, a brownout, and they got to buy it from Georgia, they're paying Georgia 42 cents? I'd rather pay you 16 and rip you off than pay Georgia 42 cents.
You know, this is the person that needs to speak in front of the Public Service Commission.
Yes.
You're coming with
I agree.
Nominated Bill.
Yes, Andy.
I second the nomination.
Yeah, you mentioned that there's some discussion about bills around PPAs. Can you
Yeah.
give us some ideas on what those are and who's trying to move those forward so that we can assist with that?
Yes, there's a couple in the works that I can't talk about specifics yet, but they will be out there. Hopefully one that specifically has to do with schools, maybe another with universities and cities, but ask me in a couple weeks. There is one that has been filed that particularly deals with commercial industrial customers. Republican sponsor Brandis filed that bill. I will say the PPA language is great. There's some fixed charge recovery language in there that is not great. So, I think that is a vehicle that is gonna need to be addressed if it's gonna move forward. I would not support that bill as is right now. But there's some more stuff that I think is gonna be better that's coming soon. Yes.
So, I'm kind of sick of utility companies just saying stuff because it sounds good, even though it has no basis in reality. You know, it used to be for years and years and years, we can't do solar because the sun doesn't shine at night, right?
Yeah.
Ignoring the fact that we actually use electricity during the day.
Yeah, too cloudy, too humid, yeah.
So
all that good
now
stuff.
the thing is, well, we have to charge solar more because they're essentially using the grid for free, and that means that we're subsidizing, everybody else is subsidizing them. And my take on that is, the reality is that they are performing two business services and calling it one. They're selling power, which is fine, and they're maintaining a grid, also fine. But the two don't need to be connected. You can charge everybody. You can charge everybody for maintaining the grid, and charge everybody equally regardless of where you get your power from. And then, if you want to, you can choose to make your own power. You can buy their power, whatever makes sense. But to say it's those bad solar people who are making you pay more for your electricity is a distortion. It's just simply not required. And the other thing that just has to be part of the math, because everything we're talking about is math, right? You can't pollute for free. There's a cost.
Those are two great points that I want to address separately because I think they're both really important. And the first is kind of the classic free rider argument that we hear. it's a nice sound point, a talking point that utilities are all using, but in most places where they've actually done a study on what is the cost of serving a solar customers, because we're sort of in this early adopter phase, they tend to have higher electricity needs before they started out. And then they put solar on their roof. And typically they're still, say they were paying 1.5 times their cost to serve when they started out. And then after they go solar, they're actually still paying more than they should of those kind of fixed costs of the grid. So when you actually do the math on it, which it is about math, it doesn't, the utilities argument, the math's just not there. We are all paying a lot to be connected to the grid. We have been for a long time. And when you actually drill down to the numbers, typically solar customers are still paying more than they should. So that's just the reality. Utilities have not done a study like that in Florida. I think if they want to make a change to this, we're absolutely going to say, like, show us the numbers and we'll show you ours, because I don't think that the cost shift is actually there. And on the second point, the carbon conversation particularly, a lot of this has to do with the fact that these power companies are externalizing their pollution costs. And so building a cost of carbon into our electricity system is just a common sense way of addressing that. And then building in the value, the full value that solar customers are actually providing to the grid, and paying you for the carbon offsets that you're providing. So it's super important and just smart policy.
The carbon is mercury in the ocean.
Yeah, absolutely. It's NOx, it's all kinds of really nasty things. So yeah, I totally agree.
I was at a conference in New York a couple years ago for solar, and it was an interesting group that were just talking about stuff. And there were, this is Con Ed, New York City's, and there were people defecting from the grid. And they're saying this was already into the hundreds, approaching thousands of city dwellers. So, if you're fed up, there are, this is a free country.
Much easier to do in New York than here.
Well, yeah, exactly, but it is happening. Yeah, it is. I mean, I was in New York, but it just, it wakes up your mind. It's like, wow, they're defecting from the grid in New York. It's like, duh,
Well, and I think we're starting to see some of that in Hawaii too.
Yeah.
I mean, I will get on my soapbox for a minute. I come from an environmental justice background, worked for nonprofits my entire career. I don't think that it is in the public interest for all of us to defect from the grid and create our tiny microgrids for 100% of our energy needs. We have this grid that we have all invested in, and it's not great, but we can make it better again and make it cleaner. And I think rooftop solar investments have a big part to do with that. And so, from my perspective, there are people out there, low-income customers included, that will never be able to go solar on their rooftop because they're renting or they're living in multifamily housing. And so there's value in having all of your solar systems plugged into this grid that we have all invested in, and making sure that everyone is treated fairly and able to share the benefits of that, whether it's community solar or rooftop solar. So that's what we're really working towards. But I absolutely understand people's frustration, and you get to a point where the policies are so punitive. I worked in Alabama and we saw this there. People just are like, forget it, I'm gonna defect. And I think it's a really unfortunate but understandable situation. So hopefully we will not get there in Florida. Yeah.
With all the expertise in the room, I'm sure I can get this question answered. I have to say, it comes to me quite often. And that's
Give her the
that,
I said with all the expertise in the room, I'm sure I'm going to have a great answer. This is a challenge that's made to me quite often, which is somehow the electricity transmitted by solar is of a lesser quality and doesn't travel on the lines as well as other generated electricity. I mean, it is said frequently. Right. So I just wanted to, that is something that's raised at public meetings. I hear quite a bit since I'm not an electrical engineer and whatever, so I just wanted to get the final great word on it.
Well, that's why they want inverters at the end of power lines. That's what I said.
Right, exactly.
They're lying to you. And the other thing they're doing is this low people, the utilities are trying to get government grants to pay for the PV on low-income people. When there's a law that says that for the health and welfare of poor people, qualified poor people, that if the power goes off, the utility must go and turn it back on and pay for it. Therefore, if you have a low-income person and he spends 6 months not being able to pay his electric bill and FPL pays it, that means they've spent $1,000 or whatever. So think about how much profit you can make if you get the government to buy a PV system to put on this house that FPL no longer has to pay their bill because they can't pay it. So every poor person who can't pay the bill, they want you, the taxpayer, to buy a solar system to put on his house so FPL doesn't have to pay his electricity so he doesn't freeze in the winter. That's what it's about.
I want to be respectful of all of your time, but I know you had your hand up for a long time in the back, so maybe we'll do one more question and then we'll wrap up. Okay. Yep. No, sir. Yes.
Oh, so several years ago, wasn't there a study, a comprehensive net metering study across 11 states? I think most of them were Midwestern.
Yeah.
And did an apples-to-apples comparison between the net effect of solar compared to centralized plants. And that's not even factoring in the externalized costs of pollution and all that stuff that these plants create. 9 of the 11 states said solar is a net benefit.
Yeah.
The 2 states sort of on the fence, kind of neutral. And I think that's important to, as far as an argument. That, solar
Yeah, I
really
think you're talking about the Rocky Mountain Institute meta value solar analysis, and there's been more studies that have come out since then. And yeah, the numbers almost always stack up the way you described them.
Right, so we need to refer to the science, to these studies, to these facts.
Science?
That there is.
You're using science?
Well,
oh my God!
There is a net benefit, and these guys can't talk around you when it comes to saying solar customers are a drag on the grid.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, everyone. I want to be respectful of all of your time. I'm going to be here. If you've got more questions, I'm happy to take those.
I just want to make one more statement regarding the freeloaderness of solar system operators. The grid is located on public lands. And how much are they paying for this? Please bring that up next time when you're in Tallahassee. Just, you know, we want to charge for it now, okay? It costs money now.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Katie. We do have, just as a FYI, so in questioning FPL CEO, who's most recently in the Miami area, and our awesome team member here, Jody, innocently walked up to him and asked him about the fixed charge, and then so we did get his answer on and recorded, so if you're interested in seeing that. And then he also kind of pivots into his thought along net metering. And we haven't even shared this with Katie yet. It's literally fresh recorded as of last week. So we're going to try and pull it up. However, just another reminder, please complete the surveys as you're walking out. We definitely want to hear from you. And Solar United Neighbors, as you know, we help you go solar, whether it's through a co-op. We are truly wanting to get the word out, community education, to give you the tools to go solar in whatever way, as well as when it comes to advocacy. If we hear things pop up in the communities all the time, let us know. We want to be able to share that with your local community as well as any statewide. This is exactly why we're playing this video for you. Anything that just pops up or anything we need to make you aware of, that's truly our end goal. We're not shy about that whatsoever. As part of our Solar 101, when we launch a co-op, our end goal is to keep you informed, to help you fight for your continued energy rights, as well as others within your community that are not able to benefit from solar. So, okay, we're going to try and play this. I promise it's not 49 minutes. It's like,
where this is Miami, where?
This is at Miami College.
Who is this?
FPL CEO, what's his name?
Eric Sillage.
There you go.
Can we make the sound a
Hold the
little
mic
louder?
up, sir.
Volume.
Hold the mic up to the.
So Jody titled this "Greenwashing Eggs and Ham." That's the title of the video.
I sat through this breakfast, so you wouldn't have to. Hopefully you can hear it. Good morning. Everybody else listening. I am a solar homeowner. Located back in Bethlehem, and I'm charged with an electric car with sunshine. Recently, the Florida Municipal Power Agency CEO encouraged its members to charge as high as a $50 charge, which was me as solar homeowners like myself, trying to make us all go away. And I'm wondering if FPL is considering doing this.
Yeah, we're not. So Florida Municipal Power Association, if you're an FPL customer, you're not impacted by the gas and light bill. And it kind of blocks it to municipal people also. So, city most of the example. So we're not advocating for a $50 increase. I don't know about $50 came about in California. What I do think we have to be now, and by the way, I think it's great that we decide to go over the group and that and that. And I think anybody who wants to do that should have the right to do it. I was very clear on that. I'm talking right now. You know, like Al, who was going on it, I have no problem. What I think we need to start having a conversation about is what point do we stop the subsidies? And everybody makes it for those who are getting the benefit. The way I look at this is that we provide, the government, the company, provide a financial incentive to people. It should be to change behavior. If you don't, then you're listening to people. And that's what there's efficiency of solar or other cases. Rooftop solar and solar generator, right, for many years was cost prohibitive. And therefore, we needed incentives to work with the people in the technology. Solar panels are no longer cost prohibitive. They are now so valuable as a commodity, it is affordable. As we have demonstrated, we're going solar for these next 32 customer buildings. Now, putting it on your roof is more expensive. It just is, because every roof is designed to live in your system as a customer for your roof. And your roof was not designed to build specifically to maximize the amount of electricity you get. It was built to protect some of the elements. So it's oriented in a way that may or may not be optimal as an example. Not all get to the point of just like building a custom house versus a spec house that's the same over and over. That's the only way. I know every mind that people want to put on the roof. What I'm not okay with anymore is the fact that everybody is paying now a subsidy under the current system in order to have those customers who choose to do it pay the full outlay themselves. And that's not really what that means. And so you get a benefit whenever you generate electricity. I have to buy it out of
line, and you know what,
We'll post this on our listserv. If you follow our listserv, we'll certainly post this very soon. Bottom line, they don't believe in subsidies. They believe rooftop solar is, the FBL themselves is, you're subsidizing between your neighbors. And Jody, if you wanted to add to that. And then he ends with, and when we go to Tallahassee and we start talking about net metering, we know all of you groups are going to fight us on that. So we know this is kind of on the horizon, that they want to tweak it. And so we are kind of careful on how we approach any kind of legislation or anything when it comes to the Public Service Commission. But this is on the horizon, and we're just bringing it to you because it was captured through an innocent question around FMPA. And so I do want to close with a few. Please fill out those surveys. Please fill out that FMPA postcard. Again, all you have to do is sign it and drop it in the box. But I want to also highlight some really cool stuff that we're doing on the resource table. I mentioned at the opening remarks, we have, if you have solar on your roof, go to the website. They have these little flyers. You can fill out a postcard. You can take your own picture or use one of our stock cards, and then you submit it, and it goes to your electeds, and it just shows how much you love your solar. Very innocent. Oh, thank you, Charlie. Sun Patch program. We have an amazing Girl Scout initiative. If you are a troop, if you're with NOAA troop or you're a leader, that would be wonderful. We can help you as we want to get the word out to Girl Scouts. We actually have an ongoing program. Jody right here is our Girl Scout expert.
Why not have a trick or treat special
We don't have a trick or treat special, Mike.
for the girls? Handouts.
We have no treats, only treats.
Please, and I know earlier our to buy a t-shirt, our square wasn't working, so we're going with the honor system. If you still want a t-shirt, please do grab a t-shirt. Our volunteers are out there, and grab a donate flyer and just donate to us later on. We really, really appreciate it. Of course, we always have, we take cash too. Learn more about battery storage. Again, a ton of information out there, and please get involved. There are a ton of opportunities. We've gone over that. I think that was a big theme of today, is bringing you together to get more involved, staying alert on the shenanigans that are going around the state, whether it's fighting your local HOA, whatever it may be, is that you identify as a barrier to you going solar or your neighbors. Work with us, let us know, volunteer with us, be the lead for that campaign. Just join us and fight for the continued energy rights. And I think, final note, again, I want to thank everyone that supported our 3rd annual Solar Congress. We welcome your feedback. We always want to improve. We don't know about what the next location is next year, but our goal is to always keep these free. Hope you enjoyed the food and the coffee and the snacks and the welcoming volunteers. So I want to thank the amazing student groups. You'll see them have either the yellow t-shirts on or the lanyards. Our volunteers at USF, they were amazing. They really, really helped secure this location and did all the legwork. So it was incredible. And our supporters that actually helped fund and paid for the food, SunPack, ESA Solar, Solar Source, Tampa Bay Solar, SC Empower, Dividend Financial, and the League of Women Voters of Florida. Please thank them. I'm not sure if they're still around, but thank you. And thank you for coming. And feel free, we're going to be hanging out doing some cleanup. Feel free to volunteer for that too. Thank you, everyone.
Nicely done.